to discuss this, I'd like to call François-Xavier Genetet, President of the ABN AMRO Investment Solution Directory, Olivier Paquier. Is Olivier Paquier with us? Here he is. Olivier Paquier, Global Head of ETF Sales, AXA IM. Hugo Kaiser, Associate External Distribution, ELEA Capital in Paris. Yann Scharer, co-founder, Deputy ECO of Air Fund. So what about this conventional fund distribution? Morningstar said earlier that this 2024 is a very good year, the third best year for the last 15 years. So, Hugo, what do you think of this distribution? How did it go as for the different categories of funds, as for the structured products, the real estate products? What's your view on that? Hello, everyone. Thank you for your invitation to those breakfasts and to this great roundtable. So as Morningstar said, 2024 was a record-striking year that demonstrated the cyclicity of the different classes of assets. The winning products such as the money market, but also the debt, private debt, and the different infrastructures, especially when it comes to the economy and society transitions. After several years of growth, when the market has tripled, now at a level of $15 billion. It's very probable that there's a rebound as for primary private equity, especially in a stabilization context when it comes to rates, but also as for the growing allocations in private properties. So to answer specifically the question on the structured products, with the success over the 24 months is huge, especially in the allocations for private owners, private investors with great impetuses with the rates, the volatility of the different markets, meeting different needs, specific needs, but also as the crisis of 2008 and 2011. This we can come back to. These strategies are very good indeed, and also when it comes to real estate, the market is struggling since 2024 due to the increase of rates, the booming of teleworking impacting the offices. In our view, the opportunistic approach is related to the value creation with the innovation creation. This remains appealing, though, and we keep working on a partnership with different entities, with the ASR labels, for instance, with the real estate pool, with investors, both private and institutional. So in your view, what didn't work that well? So that was the real estate, the opportunistic funds. What about the LBOs? At Air Fund, Yann Scharer speaking. We have a platform on private investors who we only do private equity and real estate, so on and so forth. And it's this kind of assets that we look into. As Hugo said, there are trends that are strong with the increase of EOs in terms of private equity. It's decreased fewer flows. So all these movements, all these trends are quite natural. Also, we could see is that when it comes to LBOs, the purpose is to turn to small caps rather than large caps because our debt level is less high. So there are great opportunities on the LBO market, even though things are slowing down. But it's relative. It's because it's a class of assets, as this was said earlier in the first roundtable. These class of assets is becoming more democratic. Because there are years such as the 2024 that can be considered as a transition year. There's a flow which is quite significant. So I do want to start on the topic of real estate, to be positive. To start with, but when it comes to real estate, we've all seen what happened in 2024. A number of flows that had to reactivate their gates, so there are buybacks that are in progress. But we're quite opportunistic because there are funds that are well positioned for buildings to be real estates to be purchased and so on and so forth. So we're going to propose that to our clients, CGPs and so on and so forth, and telling them, well, look at these options. It's a good way to come back to real estate through opportunistic funds. Now, when it comes to infrastructure, it's also a class of assets which is interesting because the products are changing over time. The investment cycles are changing. It used to be long cycles, but they were not adapted to the individuals. But these classes of assets are quite recent in the clients' portfolios. They are quite new for most of the players in the market, and the retail wealth market, not the institutional ones. So there's this ownership thing that we have to keep working on, even though this market is more focused on the retail wealth. But the private bank are less ahead of in advance. The CGPs, when they find an interesting strategy, they don't hesitate. When there's a product that seems to be interesting for them, they're going to reference it. They're going to work on it. So in my view, 2024 was a transitional year. The flows were quite disappointing, but it's because of the destructured products. But also we've seen the creation of a huge number of offers when it comes to LTIF2, what we call the evergreen funds. They are starting to be deployed, but in my view, they're going to change the market in the long run. Olivier Paquet, as for these outlooks, 2024 was indeed a year of all the records, hitting the records, especially when it comes to the ETFs. 25 years. It's been there for 25 years. So 2022 was more ESG year, 2023 bonds, and 2023 an American year as well. So what's your view on all this? I've been working on the topic of ETFs for 20 years, but 2024 was a year hitting the records with 276 billion euros related to net flows in Europe, with a few clients in South America, in Asia as well. So 2024 indeed was a year, quite an interesting year, because all the market configuration that we could see were more American-based. So we know that ETF are very popular there. But there are different growth of relays that we could see. The investors saw it, namely the usage of the ETFs. It's growing when it comes to the number of investors, the model of its distributions as well, and also because there are many more products and because the products are changing over time. There are three different growth levels. ESG, 2022 was an ESG year. ESG is a product that enables the whole world to have access to have access in the whole world. Bonds does catch up when it comes to bonds as for ETFs. active management is a new product which is developing. 20 years ago, when I started working on ETFs, it was only about cheap products, passive products, but now it's becoming active. Indeed, we've turned to smart beta products with the systematic management to try and counter some of the issues, especially when it comes to some of the bonds, when it comes to needs from investors who couldn't find what they needed in active or passive management. But I'm not against the conventional management with ETFs because it's very compatible.
François-Xavier Genetis, do you agree 2023 has been a year of contrast, a slowdown in the ESG flows, all of this passive management that went into the indexes, and ETF also was a part of the active management as well? What is your view of the market today? Well, it's quite identical to what Christophe has said. It was a year full of contrasts. For some people, it was a good year, and for some, it wasn't. They don't have the same feeling. Different assets behaved in different manners. 2024 was a very good year for the asset management and for the distributors. It is rare to have a market that is quite performant, which was the case. Very rare. There isn't very many people who can complain about it. But the result was more mixed for the flows. So for the slowdown of the flows for ESG, it is mixed. Yes, it is confirmed by Olivier. So it is a little bit like the difference between real temperature and the temperature that you feel. So for the distributors, what is important is to have products that allow you to correspond to the assets that you define for yourselves and to build your portfolio that you wish. We've seen this movement towards ESGs in the past few years. It's one of the elements of change. And if you saw the news about the enzyme activity this week, without commenting it, you will be able to see that it has accelerated. So we're not, when we have active ETFs, we speak about different things inside it. Yes, indeed, an active ETF is an active traditional fund. Of course, there are limits where you can't do everything you want. There are two main rules that you respect when you work in the ETF world. One that applies to the traditional world, and the other one is about liquidity that each stock exchange applies. So that is about the limitations of the ETF compared to traditional funds, but there are no specific constraints. François-Xavier, do you have the impression that these ETFs are going to become the standard for the future, if we speak about the outlook for the future? Well, we are in a market where supply creates demand. So we could have an absence of vision and of innovation when we work on the question of assets. We don't ask ourselves whether we are going to invest through an ETF or an OPC. It's not the question. What we choose is a category of assets based on several criteria. We know that ETFs have grown significantly. Olivier spoke about it. First, because we were in the passive world with a very important efficiency And now we are in the circumstances of the market that favor passive management. Uh, so from the point of view of the structure and regulations, it's not always possible to deal with everything. Delphine, for instance, spoke about crypto. For instance, I heard some of my customers who said that they invested in one or two equities that performed better than what we invested in. It's basic, but it's just called diversification and regulation. It's one of the elements that I wanted to talk about when speaking about distribution models. Today, one chooses ETF because it's an ETF, and when you mention an ETF, you do the due diligence on the company, but you don't analyze the ETF. You don't do the test for the passive test. So you reference ETF more quickly than you would reference an OPC. When you have an OPC, you need to analyze each of the strategies below or behind it. The question for me isn't about knowing or isn't about opposing OPC and ETFs. If tomorrow we need to invest through ETFs, where we would invest through ETFs. But I think that ETF isn't the goal in itself. The goal is why we invest in a certain category of assets, in a certain strategy on the market. So you think that active management is essential. You work a lot with Chinese asset managers and Indian asset managers, and you see lots of opportunities there. Yes, indeed. Speaking about active management and passive management, we don't see a match. There is a complementarity between those two styles. The diversification is easy with an ETF, following the logic of standardization with low costs. It allows you to the active management can be the solution for markets like China and India, but globally working on the efficiency of the markets or working on the innovative solutions for markets that could be implemented later on. The ETF flows for the past few years are huge, and we think that we pay attention to the price elasticity that is not very proportional on the market, and there can be some crisis of liquidity on the markets. For us, active management is really indispensable in the global allocation, and for our investors, the capital, our Elia Capital was created in 2008. It has grown, and we are more and more present on the Benelux market and on the Swiss market, specialized in sophisticated investment. Speaking about Chinese and Indian markets, although both of them are in the top 5 of the big stock exchange markets, the equity trading is still quite limited there as compared to the USA, where the algorithmical management is very present, and that makes the market very efficient. When we take the example of India, we work with Kotak Mahindra, which is the third asset management group in India. We have raised 500 million euros, and we integrated different criteria for Indian equity, and that product generates 4% of alpha per year for the past 10 years. So FundGlobam Asset Management is our Chinese partner. They manage 210 billion So the interest of this local expertise is a differentiating factor for us. And for us, this is an expertise for management that can allow you to replicate their performances. Jan Charest, so you work more on the active management, but the projects are probably less transparent. Well, I don't know if we can say if it is opposed to the ETF, but in terms of management, it's completely different. By definition, it's different participation shares with strong convictions because funds invest in 20 to 30 participation. That gives a level of diversification that is sufficient. We have, for instance, operating partners that help participations to grow. It is very different, and I think that the stake isn't really to oppose the ETFs to other assets, but it's about increasing portfolios progressively to probably attain 10 to 20%, probably a bit more for bigger clients. We know that for bigger clients it's more than that. Another phenomenon that is present is that I think that there's more and more, and I think that is going to increase. It's the non-listed part. There are companies that are not listed and they stay not listed for longer. Bigger companies stay not listed for longer because the market for investment funds is quite efficient in terms of funding by the debt or by equity. There is this porosity phenomenon that is more and more important on both sides. Another factor is the L-type 2, because there you have a project that brings you some semi-liquidity. And there you change the paradigm a little bit. You have performances that are supposed to be better on the listed markets, but you are blocked for 8 or 10 years. Yeah, you are blocked for longer because it's a longer-term investment. Yes, indeed. And with L-type 2, it's a bit different. We are speaking about 1, 2, or 3 years. It depends on the fund. And for the majority of the funds that are being launched, we have a liquidity that is at least quarterly. That changes a lot of things towards the approach that you have towards the asset category for the allocation of assets. And it can help to have a better penetrations under the mandate. There are also other implications in terms of transparency. We need to be more transparent, more broadly speaking, on valorization, on performances, even for the flows. And can you actually manage to be more transparent? Well, regulations are there to help with that. When we speak about L-type 2, you work with retail players, so there are regulations that are applicable to that. So you need to indicate certain informations. But if you look at the trend, then indeed, I think that private equity, this asset category, is a little bit like the one that we had 20 years ago, average 2% yearly. It's the industry that is going very, very well at the moment. But I think there is going to be more transparency, more products that are oriented towards larger and wider audiences. Olivier, what is your impression? Because we are speaking here about distribution, and we need to have transparent costs and costs that are limited, because costs are important. Yes, and as Jan was saying, he was speaking about porosity. It exists also for the ETF. They don't have the vocation to innovate in the asset management. They have the vocation of making this type of investment more affordable and more accessible. There are assets that are for usage for, in some countries like bitcoins or cryptocurrencies that there are like non-listed products. So for the distribution purposes, it allows you to have a package of a type of investment that used to be reserved to expert investors. It's not very liquid. It allows you to put it into a package and to put it in the package that is more available for larger audiences of investors. I found some statistics that I find quite interesting. In the United States, the ETF that are quite big today, they do not innovate. 9 products out of 10 in the US in 2024 launched by asset management companies were ETFs, and 100% of those were active ETFs. So that gives you an idea. I think that there are some of them are good, some of them are less good, but still, they require active management. And I think that we need to enter into a different distribution model. 2024 has been a year in France where the number of private investors, private individual investors, because France is quite institutional as a market. There is a little bit of distribution, and recently there's been plus 25% last year of private individual users for the ETFs. In terms of volume, it's wholesale and banks distribute ETFs, but in terms of number of transactions, private individuals start to look into that direction. Francois Xavier Genete about marketing, we can see that platforms rise, specialized platforms. You at ABN AMRO, you have just purchased one in Holland, in the Netherlands, and it's something that is probably linked to the age of the users that want to place their orders rapidly. They want to use the platforms more than people wanted to do so in the past. Well, there are several phenomena that have been announced for the past few years. Mergers in asset management companies, banks, disappearance of banks, and appearance of online bank players, asset management companies facing difficulties, small companies. For the online brokers, we have acquired the company which name is Bucks. In the Netherlands, we have we have 5 million users. So what we see is that there is part of the clientele which is attracted towards solutions that give them an access towards investments, rapid access and easy access. And Box allows you to place transactions on bonds, ETF, equity, but we can't place orders for OPC through this Box solution. In the United States, they favor fiscally, from the fiscal point of view, they favor active ETFs, and that is the basis of the success of this category of products. So we acquired Box to have a younger clientele, and it worked. Yes, it worked. it's an approach by sociotype more than an approach by age of the population. When you are very interested by financial markets at the age of 20, generally it means that at the age of 40 you are going to be very interested in that topic as well. And it's the same, like if at the age of 20 you are not interested, then at the age of 40 you are very likely to still not be interested in the topic of like finance and all this, like ETFs. So we have this approach by sociotype, and it's very complementary. It's very good.
Yeah, do you think that the specialized platforms, do you think that they may remove a part of their traditional conventional activities, business related to banks? But because, it was announced that the traditional banking would be removed, but this didn't happen. I'll stay in my comfort zone. First of all, we have two kinds of platforms, B2C, B2B. We're in B2B, so we're more the partners of the banks or the distributors. When it comes to B2C, we can see that indeed there are a number of big platforms that are deployed to make a private equity democratic in marketing directly with individual investors. Actually, in reality, these individual investors are more finance entities, council offices. And actually, when it comes to the actual democratization of things, well, it's more related to crowd equity, crowdfunding, and we switch from investments through SPVs through and to the fact that these platforms try to have their clients investing into those funds. But in my view, this remains exceptional. I think that the model B2B2C will remain for a long time the main model, the one that will be prevailing over the French market and also the European market. It's the one that we're using. But also what is interesting is that it's not only about optimization of the distribution through the platform, but it's also about the structuring of the products with which we can help the distributors. Another issue, another challenge, which is key, which is not properly tackled by most of the players, namely the need to make all the chain industrialized. When I say all the chain, it's not only when it comes to the producers, management companies and so on, but also clients, and in the background, anything related to asset services, depositories, which was not available for retail clients. But now we have the the LTIV2s, and at the moment, actually, we don't really know what it's going to be like because no asset services knows how to host thousands of investors. So indeed, there's something to look into, not only in France, but also in Luxembourg, because as for the LFTs, too, there are many things that are being deployed. As for the distribution modes, you've developed partnerships with platforms. Do you think that this is the model that will become the main one? Indeed, at Léa Capital, this is a challenge that we've taken up, namely to have some of the solutions to some of our offers made more tangible, made accessible. We are working with specialized managers. We represent them as new models of marketing. And it's about partnering with managers in order to outsource their sales force. So these managers are more active. And it's on these very topics that we started in 2008 with a kind of alternative management of hedge funds. And actually, in the end, it was relayed by other kinds of products, for instance, cash flow placement, and where the main representatives in France of Asian players actually, we come from this world, so to speak, because the institutions are our play field. We have a network of private banking, for instance, and we work with them on strategies, especially when it comes to subscription platforms. And also we have on the Luxembourg side, we have life insurance contracts in Luxembourg with private clients within and individual clients within PCR1. Olivier, the main distribution channel remains the private banks. In France, yes, and it's the case also in a number of European countries. But as Jens said, there are many similarities with other things that are quite counterintuitive. Our distribution mode is global, namely B2B2C, including in France. So we remain in the world of ETFs, in the provision of ETFs. That's the case mainly in France, which is, very that works in closely with the banks and the individuals. So actually, it's a way to respond to the needs, the clients' needs, those clients who invest themselves. For instance, the new banks, especially the French new banks, the French who've deployed the new banks, online bankings, who put forward ETFs. So earlier we referred to the rejuvenating or younger populations or investors on these kind of platforms. It's very interesting. So I looked into the recent study, a recent survey done by the AMF. Actually, there were two studies, one in 2012, another in 2004. So the data are in shorter volume. They're very limited, but still we can get information from that. So the main reasons why people would use ETFs, the individual ones, are, all that is counterintuitive as well. It's not only related to price and transparency, but it's rather related to accessibility. The fact that they can do things directly from their smartphones. It's about them figuring out how much they have on their account, what the price is, and so on and so forth, with the valorization date, and so on and so forth. And also the regularity of the performances, the fact that there's no surprise. So this is quite interesting. So AMF has discovered that, has found out that there are twice more users in France when it comes to ETFs, about 300,000 people who are very active as for ETFs. They are younger than 35 years old. So it's, the age average is much younger. It was in 2024, average age was 41. So these individuals are younger, and also many more women who invest for the first time in stock exchanges. So the first actions done when it comes to stock exchange, as it's been found out by the AMF, are by women. Indeed, we need to educate the French as for finance, because people may invest in ETFs because, as you said very well, it's a product which is easily accessible, with limited costs, with more transparency. Anyway, it's more simple to understand than other products. Yes, as I was listening to you, Olivier, I feel both pleased and also, there are a few things that are quite a few signals spontaneously. So it's quite positive to see that many more women consider things, tackle these stock exchange actions and operations, because this is part of financial education indeed. But we're talking about a population that didn't experience major financial crisis. Indeed, it's about people investing in ETFs who expect regularity, transparency as for their investments. Indeed, it's true for passive investments. We know what we bought, but this doesn't mean that the markets will not be in a crisis, and when there's a drastic drop of the markets, then the question will be, how are we going to support those clients who've invested in ETFs? If the future is a portfolio that was implemented, that was created before, ChatGPT, or based on ChatGPT and so on and so forth, then, we may ask ourselves questions. We may have, when it comes to how to explain the citizens how to put in place a pension savings plan, how to build up a financial portfolio, how to have a balance with active management, and so on and so forth. So I think that it's in this niche that we have to be more present. And I think that indeed, explaining the financial operations, financial education, especially with the youngest, is paramount. Especially, indeed, the data show that the youngest ones invest in ETFs. I had the opportunity to discuss with persons aged between 22 to 26 years old, starting to work, interested in interests, in buying shares. And when it comes to choosing where they would invest, I had, those clients were young, but with a degree above the master's degree. But they didn't have the keys, the financial keys for that. Therefore, this shows that we need to educate, from a financial point of view, these younger populations. Yann, Hugo, what do you think? To add on what was said by François-Xavier, indeed, finance is becoming more and more part of the mindsets in the different populations, not only women, but also the young, because these people would take more time to look into what finance is, and also because we live in a capitalist world where finance plays a key role. So, this will help in understanding that we'll have to face transitions that will be tricky. When it comes to traditional, conventional banking financing, the asset management has an exponential growth, especially when in the over the 10, 20, 30 years. The last 10, 20, and 30 years, especially when it comes to investments into the different markets. In Europe, in Asia, this is also a topic which is a subject which is becoming more and more important. In the United States, for other reasons, they remain a bit behind when it comes to ESR. But indeed, this is subject to controversy, but it's also a way to seize opportunities beyond topics or sectors that are key in energy transition, society transition, sustainable infrastructure. We support fundraising in having electrical ships or trains. The American infrastructures are very financed. In Europe, there's a belated Uberization of the infrastructures. We're quite delayed indeed, but there are positive movements with about 80% of the transports that operate with catenaires. Yann, what do you think? There seems to be a contradiction, but on my end, what works well beyond the performance, which is expected, which is beyond the listed markets, is that we can tell stories, narratives, and this is what I like. Because we wouldn't invest in something which is hyper-financial, which is not very clear. But we know that the managers are going to invest in some of the companies on different areas, health, infrastructure and so on. But there are entrepreneurs behind all that with an economic life and so on and so forth. And we can find everything, the regional fund that will invest on in the Brittany region, the Normandy region, or at an international level. But I think that in order to speak to the individuals, this can work, at least for some of them. Maybe for some of them, it's more interesting to invest in a fund that will create employment at the regional level rather than to American
Welcome to Paris. Our Global Fund registration team acts as a one-stop shop, providing comprehensive support to meet all regulatory requirements for the distribution of foreign investment schemes in Switzerland. With our broad range of services, we help our clients navigate the complexities of fund registration and ensure seamless market access. With us, you can also expand your knowledge about the Financial Services Act. Our online courses are now available 24/7. With GFR at 1741 Group, we prioritise your needs, act independently in your interest, offer attractive representation fees, cover FINMA fees for agent changes, and provide expert support to ensure your distribution team is FINSA compliant. You can contact our team for dedicated support and expert guidance.